comics?
Because they have no home.
Welcome to the angriest after show that you will watch for the Red Lantern's Blood Brother.
With blood and rage of crimson red.
Ripped from a corpse so freshly dead.
I don't have the rest of it memorized.
Together with our hellish hate will burn you all. That is your fate.
Yes, that is the,
The
Red
Red
Lantern Oath.
Nice.
Welcome
Well,
to the after show.
everybody, I don't know that we have anything real specific planned for this one, but this is a chance for us to do a little bit more of a deep dive into the characters. So we talked about Guy Gardner the most, I think, in the actual episode proper, but the main members of the Corps, I think we mentioned them all. We've got Guy Gardner, also known as Deranged Santa, or that's what does Rancor call him that?
I can't remember
now,
but yeah,
who it
somebody
is
calls
that
him that.
says it might have been one of the Green Lanterns. Is like, you look like a deranged Santa. We've got Atrocitus, who was also known as Atros before he became Atrocitus. Bleeze, the hot one with the crazy wings.
That's what Guy calls her. Yeah.
Dexstar, also known as Dexter. He was actually a cat that witnessed the death of his owner and became consumed with rage and became Atrocitus's like right hand pet after that. So pretty weird. Rancor, also known as Jack Moore. Scalux, also known as Horse Guy. Zelias Zox, known as the Testicle with Teeth. And Ratchet, also known as Little Squid Dude. So everybody's got nicknames in this story.
Guy doesn't keep track of their names very well, or he doesn't know them, so he makes up nicknames for them.
Yeah.
Whether they understand them or not, because they're all obviously Earth references. So
well, the Testicle with Teeth thing is so funny because that's something that comes back at the end of one of the other trades. He's like, because in this one, I think Zox is like, what is that? Is it fierce? And Guy's like, well, kind of. And then you know, one of the other trades later, he's like, I found out what it means, and it's not a compliment, Guy, or something like that. So he comes back at him, and that comment comes back. So that's one of the funnier ones.
Sort of like the Guardians of the Galaxy, and you have Rocket and Star-Lord, and he's like, oh, you're a angry trash panda. And he's like, is that better? What is that? He's like,
it's so much worse.
Yeah, it's such an interesting tone that Charles Soule takes with this, because they have to remain rageful, but he does show a lot more emotions within those characters than the previous writer did. And I think ultimately that was a smart call, because you really can't do anything with these characters that are sort of stuck in one mode and can't go anywhere else. And I think that was really the problem with the first half of the book. So
yeah, especially if you're going to give them their own run where it's focused solely on them, you've got to do something interesting with them other than like, so every page they just go and kill somebody and there's not even any dialogue. There's just, you know, it goes every once in a while and that's it. Interesting book. You know, you got to do something with it. You got to tell a story. And the way that Charles Soule chose to do it was to make the characters very interesting. And that was something that just appealed to me so much, because I really like the character driven stories. I like stories where you don't even have to write the story. You basically just take the framework for a story, you dump the characters in there, and it basically writes itself because the characters are so rich in everything that they do. So those kinds of stories, and especially like the anti-hero and the sort of more quirky, sort of funny, but you know, like especially with all the nicknames, like that was pretty funny, but it wasn't cheap humor. They weren't necessarily a funny group, but you know, Guy is just sort of this like loose cannon, like beat cop, like, hey, what's going on over there? Hey, you know, hey, it's no problem, you know, something.
He's not the most respectful person in the world.
He has no filter, and
no,
he's kind of unhinged, and that's what makes him fit so well with the Red Lantern Corps. But like we said during the episode, he sort of takes it too far and he starts to like it, and we didn't get to it, but basically what happens is Hal comes to rescue him, although it's later than he would have liked because of the intergalactic thing going on, and Guy like punches him in the face and he's like, no, you know, I'm not going back, I'm staying. And I felt like him doing that was a little I don't know, it was a little hard to buy. Like he
Oh,
he was
interesting.
he was calling Hal to say, hey, get me out of here. I got the information. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And Hal's like, just wait a little bit longer. And then suddenly he's like, no, I'm not going back, and punches him. Like, I don't think there was enough angry scenes with Guy to necessarily like I wanted him to want to stay with the people, the characters that were developed a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like have him, he's on the ship and he's like helping them see things about themselves that they didn't realize, and they go off on a quest to exercise some vengeance and kill some bad guys, and they have this group together. And so then when Hal comes back, like, hey, I know I just met these guys and it's crazy, but call me maybe. But like I like hanging out with them, and I don't want to go back to the Green Lantern Corps. And then have Hal push him, and then Guy snaps and gets angry and fights back. Like I think that would have been a little more fleshed out story for Guy not wanting to go back to the Greens, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it wasn't enough of that for me.
Some of that stuff would have pushed it a little bit higher for me, I think, too, where if they could have, again, we talk about this a lot, but just let it breathe a little bit more. But
yeah,
the climate at DC during this time was very much, if you're doing a Lantern book, you got to tie it into all the Lantern books. If you're doing a Batman book, you got to tie it into all the other Bat titles. And they were just all about that. We don't just want you to buy Batman. We want you to buy Detective Comics and Batgirl and Nightwing and Batman and Robin as well, to get the whole story, and that very much, there were a lot of Lantern titles at this time, because we had Green Lantern, which had Hal Jordan as the lead. We had Green Lantern Corps, which was sort of the buddy cop book with John Stewart and Guy Gardner until Guy went over to the Red Lanterns. We had Green Lantern New Guardians, which was Kyle Rayner's book. And then we had this one. And then later on, I think Sinestro got his own title as well. So
yeah, I really like those storylines where you have the different books or the different shows, whatever medium it is, and they do tell that cohesive story. Like I really like those crossover events, but especially in comics, it's really hard to get a grasp on it. It's basically you're either in or you're out. Like you've been reading it for so long and you live and breathe it, so you buy all the books and you read it and the whole crossover, or you like it and you want to get into it, but it's just too much and you don't know the backstory, and it's just hard to get into the crossover event because you're like, well, Green Lanterns, they're cool and all, but the Red Lanterns, I really like them. And you want to read about Red Lanterns, but then they get sucked into the Green Lantern story. And you're kind of like, well, I want to stay more on the Red Lantern side. Whereas if you're a fan of the whole Lantern story of, every tribe and every color of the emotional spectrum, and you're like, I like the Green Lanterns, and the Indigos are cool, and the Sapphires are interesting, and I like the Red Lanterns. And then when you see a crossover with them, it's like, especially that spread in the annual where they're all coming together as an army to fight what was
Relic,
I Harbinger think? Yeah, Relic. And they're coming to fight Relic, and they're all just together as one army. That was cool. That was like the moment of seeing all the Star Trek ships on Deep Space Nine all come together for the first time. And you have all these Starfleet ships, and it's like, wow, we've never had all of them together like this before. It was sort of like that with all the Lantern Corps, seeing them unite. So that's where the crossover events can be really cool, is when you get moments like that, but it can be a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, you've really got to have a heavy dollar investment in it as well.
Yeah.
Especially at this time, because DC wasn't doing anything with digital comics back in 2011. So it's probably a little more accessible for people to read if they go to the app now, because you can jump from book to book, or the DC app is pretty good about organizing story arcs, where you can just click on a story arc and search for it and find it. So that's another good thing too. But
yeah, I have problems with the Marvel. Well, I use the website, not necessarily the app, but I find the DC Infinite to be infinitely more organized and easier to find things than the Marvel version. But at the same time, a lot of what I search is for Spider-Man. So there's like everything is called Spider-Man or Amazing Spider-Man or Spectacular or Superior or some other adjective.
Yeah.
So when you have names that are all the same, it makes things hard to find. Whereas like Red Lantern, Green Lantern is at least different enough, I think, that you can find what you're looking for easier. But just an interesting little tidbit. Maybe your experience is different. let us know in the comments. Engage with us on social
That's
media. Let us
right.
know. Tell me. I would like to know. I'm interested to know. And we could
Yeah.
read some of those in the after show or in the episode too, if you have questions or comments, or if
Yeah, for sure.
whatevs.
So
But
the
anyway,
this is skipping to the end, but I wanted to get to it before we got off of this story
sure.
specifically. But so were you a fan of them tying it into the Lights Out event where they fought Relic, or did that really just feel kind of tacked on? Because to
So,
me, it felt tacked
yeah, it felt really tacked on.
on.
You had a question in your notes if I had to reference the wiki or if I remembered the event. So when I actually started reading the annual, I did remember it. I was really
Yeah.
surprised because I don't know, some like comic storylines and stuff, sometimes I have trouble remembering details, or if they're ones that weren't particularly like, okay, this is all right,
Right.
whatever, I don't have as great memory of it. I think that's, just kind of natural. But for this one, as soon as I started reading the annual, it was all coming back to me. I was like, oh yeah, I remember this, the reservoir and, depleting the emotional energy. And it was sort of like Star Trek when, the warp energy is destroying the universe. And so we have to use less of
Yeah.
it. And I was like, oh yeah, this was kind of a lame story anyway.
It was.
So
it's not a well-liked.
yeah. So not only did they tack the Red Lanterns into this, but they also tacked them into kind of a not the greatest event anyway. So that was kind of two strikes against it, but it didn't deter what happened. Like you could almost just, and that's what we said in the episode, you could almost just not read the annual and sort of pick up and be like, okay, a couple things happened. We came back after a break or whatever. And now the last three issues are sort of different focus than the first three. So thank goodness it doesn't ruin the story arc that they had to where it took over, multiple issues. It was contained in an annual separately. So I did like that.
Yeah. It's good that, especially like if you were reading this monthly at the time, you would have had to buy the Green Lantern annual. So if you were just buying the Red Lantern book, you really would have just continued and it wouldn't have been a big deal. Just been like, oh, they have their own sector now. Okay, well, what's going on with Ratchet? And then that's kind of where you pick up. So
there was another sort of forced tie-in thing almost every issue. I think it was like the first two and the last two or something like that. They had the reference to News Channel 52, which, new 52, Channel 52. They even did that like in the Arrowverse where they had News 52 or whatever, but they have this little news program. And so they give all these highlights on different storylines, like the Joker's daughter, flooding that occurred from a battle with Atlantis, Flash versus Reverse Flash, Lantern Corps battles with Relic or Manhunters or whatever, tensions between Justice League and the JLA, like all this stuff. And I really felt like they were like, hey, you're reading this sort of C book that nobody cares about, but buy more of our comics about the Flash and Justice League and Aquaman and our name brand stuff. Like,
it's funny because none of that was in the trade, which is what I was reading from. Yeah, none of that was in there.
That's good.
They cut all that out. So yeah, my guess is that it was left in the single issues just to sell more issues. Yeah. So I guess when they converted it in the app, they just left that stuff in.
They took the issues.
There weren't ads in your issue, were there?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. But they still had little, I guess, like ad comics basically at the end of each one. Was it like Ambush Bug and Bethany Snow? No, it's like Calendar Man, right? It's like Calendar Man.
He looks like a Namek basically with like a gold thing on his face.
Oh no, that's Ambush Bug. I think they have Ambush Bug reporting. So yeah, who, if anybody doesn't know who he is, not an important character, but he's kind of DC's fourth wall breaking goofball character, though much, 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 much less popular than like Deadpool or Harley Quinn or somebody like that. So yeah, that was funny because I did see that in your notes and I was like, that wasn't in the trade. So the story is going to flow a little bit better if you read it that way, I guess. But that's more of a monetary investment. So it's up to you guys.
Definitely ambushed the end of each issue.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny though, because as you're talking about that, I'm like, oh man, because I was reading every DC book in the line at this time. I mean, I don't even want to think about how much money I was spending on trades at this point. But yeah, the JLA had a big battle in Atlantis where they had to deal with Ocean Master and yeah, Flash was fighting Reverse Flash and The Lantern Corps fighting the Manhunters, I don't recall as much as like there was something that the Guardians created, the Guardians of the Universe, called the Third Army, that were these organic hosts that would just like assimilate other
Oh,
organic
yeah.
material and then
That was
drain it of all
weird.
its emotions and just make them this mindless thing. And they're like, that's how we'll finally get order in the universe. And it's like, man, you
No.
guys have lost your minds.
Mhm.
So I do remember that. But that's funny you said Ambush Bug looks like a Namek. I never noticed that before.
Well, he's got
But
the like. In the,
I know he has the antenna. He's actually a bug though. He's not a. I don't know what a Namek is. It's just a Namek.
Hmm.
But
It bugged me a little bit. How
yeah,
much he
well,
looked
that's
like a Namek.
fine. It
Okay.
makes sense.
2 puns with the same
Yes.
character. That's
Ha,
okay.
ha!
So we do have some other media adaptations of Red Lanterns that I just wanted to cover. The biggest one is in Green Lantern, the animated series, which was a really well-written series just,
Mhm.
you know, for lanterns in general, but also included a lot of Red Lantern. And I can't remember my first exposure to Red Lanterns, but I want to say it's probably that show because I remember it, I think, pretty well before
Yeah.
reading any comics. So, but they adjusted the oath a little bit, and probably because it's animation, so it's more directed at kids, so they have to water it down a little bit. But they
Yeah.
say, with blood and rage of crimson red, we fill men's souls with darkest dread and twist your minds to pain and hate. We'll burn you all. That is your fate. And that one just sounds more like they're doing some sort of like evil manipulation or something.
Yeah.
So that one really didn't necessarily fit very well, although, you know, blood and rage of crimson red, ripped from a corpse so freshly dead, you know, why I guess if it's a bad guy corpse, like a criminal corpse so freshly dead,
Yeah.
then, you know, together with our hellish hate, they'll burn all of the criminals. That's their fate. So, you know, maybe.
Yeah.
But even Guy commented, he's like, that's the least inspiring thing I've ever heard. And so he's like, you know what? Let's go with this. We're red, you're dead, which wasn't much better.
It's pretty terrible. Yeah.
There's
But that being terrible is in character for him though. So.
Yeah, true. There's another version where I can't remember the exact events, but basically Aya in the Green Lantern animated series is supposed to activate the ring and battery, but it doesn't work. But she says something along the lines of, the power of crimson red can lead your soul away from dread and heal the deepest wounds of hate. Let no one else decide your fate. And I thought that was actually one of the best ones because it really fit with Blood Brothers, and also of, you know, the character moments that we had, and actually like they're almost sort of getting over their rage, but not like letting it go. They still use it as fuel, but it's more like coming to terms with it, I guess.
Sure.
But at the same time, like if this is the oath that you chant in front of other people, you probably don't want to advertise like, hey, if you're really angry, come join our corps and we'll heal your deepest wounds of hate. And you can do whatever you want after that. And you can be angry and burn criminals. Like, not necessarily the best recruiting
Right.
poster, but
well, I mean, and the thing, we haven't really talked about how the different corps function. But
that's a long conversation.
But it is a long conversation. But the rings, at least my understanding for all the corps, are they're kind of like their own self-operating devices a little bit, because when the host dies, they shoot out into the universe to another planet and they seek out another proper candidate to use the ring. So that's how it works with Green Lanterns. That's how it works with the Sinestro Corps. That's how it works with the Red Lanterns. So the ring itself is going to recruit for them. So in a way, they don't really have to do it. There is a point in the early trades where Atrocitus creates a bunch of new rings, but then again, it's just like, all right, they're going to go find
they're almost
people.
programmed.
Yeah.
And they actually do have like computer voices, like it'll tell you when the power is low. And I don't know if that's like projecting into your mind or if it says it out loud, but it can do stuff like that, almost like a computer. So it's almost like engineered and programmed, and each core has a different way of doing it, but sort of the science is the same. You have like a central battery,
right?
That sort of is, I guess, an intermediary between all of the rings. They're programmed to seek somebody who has the intense emotion of whatever it is. So like Red Lanterns would be rage, Green Lanterns would be will, and so on and so forth. and seek out new life forms and new civilizations to give rings to. So
Well, and they
yeah, it's
have
almost
universal
like-
translators in them
oh yeah, they
too,
have that too. Yeah.
which is not something that we really get into in this story. But if you're wondering why humans and aliens and all these races are able to communicate, the rings actually translate for them so that they don't have trouble communicating. So
Yeah. Some other appearances, they appear in the Justice League action episode called Rage of the Red Lanterns. So you can guess what that's about. But they pursue Lobo to Earth after he steals 3 newly created Red Lantern rings and fights the Justice League until Lobo acquires the Spider Gauntlet and attacks both parties, who join forces to defeat Lobo. The Red Lantern Corps recover the stolen rings and return to their base, where Lobo is taken to an intergalactic prison because that's where he belongs. But interesting. I haven't seen that, but I wonder.
yeah, I've never seen an episode of Justice League Action. I think conceptually what it is it's more like, with the title, it's more like these short action adventure stories that they do, and I think there's like a couple per episode or something like that. So kind of like they would do in animation back in the day, where you've got the A story before the commercial break, and then you come back and you've got the B story, and then that's the episode. I think that's my understanding, is that's how the show is set up. But yeah, a lot of I've seen clips here and there. I know a lot of kind of second tier DC characters show up in it, which is cool because I've seen like Firestorm and Blue Beetle and some of those guys, so that's pretty neat.
Okay. Completely different. The DC Superhero Girls episode, hashtag Rage Cat, I guess. Of them in a photograph, I think, only. So I haven't seen that either, but it's probably entertaining. But as the name suggests, it's aimed at girls, but it's also aimed at a younger audience because it's very cartoony.
At I swear I've seen an episode with my nieces where Dexstar is there. So maybe I'm wrong, but
I mean, Rage Cat, that sounds like Dexstar.
Yeah. I feel like they fought at least him at some point, but I don't remember the specifics as well as I do like the Hawkman episode I talked about last time.
So you would think that the Red Lantern Corps would be really good for video game adaptations, because, you know, when it's about fighting, you know, they would be a great corps to fight as. So we have, of course, Injustice and Injustice 2, which, you know, we have a lot of DC characters in there. So you wouldn't necessarily say that the Red Lanterns specifically are making a cameo, but it's also just nice to have them represented, even if we're representing all kinds of DC characters. And the same thing with like Lego Batman 3. I mean, you know, almost every character in the DC universe is in that game, but it's still nice that they included the Red Lantern Corps. And then, of course, DC Universe Online, another one, War of the Light DLC has the Red Lantern Corps in that as well. So they're out there in media. They may not necessarily be super popular, but there's at least some other things out there that you can kind of get into if you are a fan of the Red Lantern Corps.
Yeah, they're one of those where I feel like the amount of backstory and explanation that you have to do to adapt them is significant. So you almost need to build up the Green Lantern universe and concept before you get into that.
Yeah.
In a way. So that may be why we haven't really seen anything with them live action. The Green Lantern movie obviously bombed, you know, so that wasn't a good jumping off point for that or anything. I really do hope that DC gives the Green Lantern Corps and all those related characters a chance again in the future, because all we've had really in the last decade is seeing the ancient Green Lantern fight with like the Atlanteans and all that in the Justice League movie. And I mean, other than that, that's really all we've seen.
We've had references like in the Arrowverse, they've made little references to I forget, like the aerospace and
oh yeah, like Ferris Air.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's a pilot or something, like just little subtle things. I mean, they did that a lot in the Arrowverse, but it was like, and then the whole thing about John Diggle, like, well, maybe he'll become a Green Lantern. And then they actually did something like that in the crossover event where they had him open a box or find something and it was like glowing green. And so that's like Arrow's over, so they're never going to do anything with it. I mean, as far as we know, but it was
Yeah.
like kind of giving the fans like, well, this will never happen, but just to tickle your fancy, sure, we'll show him with a little bit of, green light coming out and, tease that a little bit. But, we have all these little teases here and there of like Lantern Corps stuff. But, since the Green Lantern movie failed, I think nobody just wants to touch it. But it's so rich, like with all the different colors of the emotional spectrum and all the different stories. Like, please don't pick the reservoir depleting story and don't do anything with that. Like, I did not care for that at all. But
no, well, it sucks because Lights Out was basically it was like a really badly implemented environmental allegory. I feel like,
yeah,
of like, well, these resources won't last forever. But because of the nature of these books, the excitement comes from seeing them do crazy crap with their rings. So if they can't use their rings because they're draining the emotional reservoir of the universe, it's like, well, that kind of takes away the specialness of these books and what these characters can do. So they had to end that story in a way where it's like, oh, the emotional reservoir has been refilled and now we have, however many thousand years of being able to use them again. And then of course they never address that again.
Yeah.
So it is like the Warp 5 story that you talked about from Star Trek, where they're like, we're doing damage with the warp drive to the universe, so we can't go really fast anymore. And it's like, okay, let me roll my eyes and see how long the writers stick to that,
Right. Like
But,
that's the whole thing that we need to do here is to go fast, to travel to distant worlds. And if we can't do that, then what kind of show do we have?
Right.
We can't have, Red Lanterns and Green Lanterns using their power like, oh, hey guys, we need to fight, but we need to conserve energy. So let's just turn off our rings and fist fight. Like, well, now it just becomes something more regular. But not just that, but also from a story perspective, I kind of feel like the emotions that each person brings to the table, like I would have thought that the people that are connected to the rings would be fueling the emotional energy of the universe because they are tapping into it, but they're also giving back to it because they're experiencing these emotions. Like that's why the rings seek them out, is like, oh, you have this intense love, you have this intense anger, you have the ability to overcome fear, you have the ability to instill great fear,
right.
All the rings seek these people out because they have this emotional energy. So if they have it, then they should be able to, like, they still depend on the ring's energy and have to recharge with a battery and all of that stuff. And that, could be a plot device as well. But
sure,
at the same time, I feel like they're so connected that they're really, how could there be an emotional reservoir that could be depleted from this energy that they're using that they should also be either producing or in sync with, or it should be tapping them and so like, oh, I feel so drained, like I don't feel so angry today, that kind of like something. I mean, I guess that happened to Ratchet, but that was different reasons. So
I wasn't a fan of that. But the cool thing is, even through events like that, if you do look at that sort of like 2011 to 2016 period of the Lantern books, all of the human characters had a place in the titles. Hal was in the Green Lantern title, and he eventually becomes Corps leader, and then later on they decide he's not fit to lead, and John Stewart steps up to be Corps leader. So they had something for both of them to do. Kyle Rayner is the White Lantern, the life lantern, basically, and so he has a unique place in his own title, where they actually kind of had like a team book where he had one of each of the Corps working with him for a while, and that was really neat. And then, once we get Guy over in the Reds, it's like, okay, all the human characters have a purpose, because something that bothers me sometimes when I think about the Lantern books is, are we reaching critical mass in there being an overwhelming amount of humans in the Corps? Because if you think about the vastness of the universe, it's like, wow, are they like a racist organization? Are they just inducting humans left and right because those are the only ones worthy to wield the rings, or what? Because I mean, then we add like Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz in later, which I love both of those characters. But when I think about it from more of a story perspective and not a character perspective, I'm like, does it make sense that we have this many humans though? It seems like a lot. Like, but they, at least with them, they kind of found their place as like, they're the rookies and the Justice League is going to train them later on. And actually the penciler of the last thing that we read, Brian Hitch, he wrote Justice League like right after the New 52 period ended. And that's what he did with Jess and Simon. He had them kind of training under the like the main leaguers, and then they were in the Justice League book. So that was kind of cool. But
Yeah.
they've introduced more Human Lanterns since then. I mean, there's like a teen Green Lantern that she like reverse engineered the technology for the ring and figured out how to
Oh, like
put one
Ironheart did
on.
with Iron Man.
Well, she basically figured out how to hack the ring and put it on, even though it wasn't intended for her. So
Sure.
I don't really know where her storyline goes. And then there's Far Sector, that has a character that I believe exists like far in the future of the core, where she's like the only one. So
Weird. Yeah, that's what I was saying before, is like, is there some reason, and maybe they haven't explored this, and writers at DC, if you take this idea, you know, I want some kickback for it.
yeah, let's get some compensation.
Right. But basically, you know, humans being some sort of like, they did this on Babylon 5 actually, which was really cool, where Delenn says, you know, humans build communities, and that's something that none of the other races really do. And so that's why they're in a prominent position in that storyline, is because they do something that nobody else does, and they do it well, and it causes all these different groups who hate each other to actually work together. And so with the Lantern Corps, I feel like there's a story there, and maybe it's already been told, I don't know, but of the humans being, you know, because of their emotions and how they can change, and they're not necessarily like one track, although some people are, but there's just such a great range of different emotions that we can experience them in certain ways, that allows the humans to wield the rings more effectively than some of the other races. And so if you put that spin on it, then it's like, okay, that's why there are all these humans. I mean, obviously because we're humans, look, we want to hear about humans and not the aliens. But you know, from a story perspective, again, it could be that the humans are able to do all these different things, and so that's why they're in more prominent positions. And you sort of see that with especially Hal Jordan and definitely Kyle Rayner, where they actually do end up putting on all kinds of different rings and different emotions and different of the spectrum, and being part of those cores. And you could kind of just say, well, like, well, you know, this is our breadwinner character, and that's why he's able to function in all the different cores, because it's more interesting like that. I mean, that's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is to say that these guys experience such differing emotions that's why they're able to sort of integrate really into any core that they want to. And there's one particular panel, and I still remember it, with the little lantern insignia talking, and all it says is,
Hal Jordan, rise.
And it just like gave me goosebumps, because I'm like, oh my gosh, Hal Jordan's going to be a Black Lantern. Like, that's amazing. Like that. I thought that was awesome when I read that. I was like, oh, chills.
Yeah, I think that was close to this period. It would have been like right before, or would have been right at the end of Jeff Johns' run, I think. So where he became, because he dies and then he gets resurrected as a Black Lantern. So that's honestly, that's a story idea that I would love to see them explore, and I don't know that they have. But what you're reminding me of, honestly, is Dragon Ball Z, and the way that the humans, they have certain abilities that even the Saiyans don't have. Like, they're able to suppress their power levels. I think they teach the Kamehameha to Goku, because that wasn't something from the Saiyan race. That was like an Earth technique. The Spirit Bomb is something that only they do. Krillin, who gets knocked out of every fight really quickly, is human, but he also has that one attack that can damage anybody, which is his Destructo Disc, even if he's way less powerful. So it is a good story idea for them to explore, to have the humans have something unique about them that makes them better candidates for the ring. And if nobody's done anything with that yet, they need to, because I feel like we need that explanation this late into their history, because otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like, okay, well, why is there only one of this guy's race and one of that guy's race? And in the case of Kilowog, I think the rest of his race is gone. But you know, it's that seems to happen to a lot of races in the DC universe, actually.
If you'd like to fund our ideas, you can go to bonelesscomicspodcast.wordpress.com and donate generously to our PayPal account, and then we can
generate currency.
Yes, exactly. For these ideas. So if you want to use these, hey, that's great. Just give us a little kickback. That's all.
That's right.
All right.
Oh, I forgot we even had that PayPal account.
We do. Thank you for our monthly subscription. I won't name the person. They can remain anomalous. No, not anomalous.
Anomalous.
You may remain anonymous, but thank you so much for your donation. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we do appreciate that.
All right. Well, anything else for this after show?
No, I don't think so. I think we've really talked through the concepts and everything pretty significantly. The only thing I'd like to add is I would like to see us get back to a point where we're seeing some of the other cores again. DC is back way off on Green Lantern stuff, and maybe that's just how it goes. But it's a fascinating universe out there, and I'd like to see more of it. So
yeah, I'd really like to see almost either their own series or own movie or something, but also like have the various cores together, but then also explore them separately. And maybe that's like we build to a movie they sort of did that with Defenders, where you had each character had their own separate show. And then we had the Defenders show where we brought all of them together. I'd like to see them do something like that for the Lantern Corps. That could be really exciting.
Yeah,
so.
Agreed.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. Check out our other videos. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you get the latest updates. But until next time, we'll see you next time.
All right. Catch you later.
All right. Peace out.
Green light.
Thomas?
Big